So the Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is a professor of sociology at Georgetown University. He is an author, a contributing opinion writer at the New York Times, an MSNBC political analyst, a contributing editor at the New Republic, host of the Michael Eric Dyson podcast, an ordained Baptist minister for over 30 years. Dr. Dyson received his PhD from Princeton University in 1993 and has also authored nearly 20 books on subjects such as the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Nas's debut, Illuminatic, Tupac, I just messed that one up, Marvin Gaye, Hurricane Katrina's devastating long-lasting effects, it tells you who I am, and he has won two NAACP Image Awards for Outstanding Literary Work in Nonfiction, and the American Book Award in 2007 for Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster. Essence named Michael Eric Dyson one of the 40 most inspiring African Americans, and Ebony has listed him among the most 100 most influential Black Americans in the world. He often speaks at universities and political conventions, but he is also known for his engagement here, in union halls, in prisons, in classrooms, and in churches. Throughout his career, Dr. Dyson has had a profound effect on American culture and thinking. His latest book, What Truth Sounds Like, continues the conversation started in 2017 by his bestseller, Tears We Cannot Stop, and was the winner of the 2018 Southern Books Prize for Nonfiction. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dyson to Baltimore and to Loyola University, Maryland.
Kindly, Sister Erin, for that very gracious introduction, and to all of the wonderful folk that I've got a chance to see and to meet and reconnect with. I was here 15 years ago before half of y'all were born, or when you were still playing in your underoos. That might just be a biggie line. It may not be true. Wearing your lumberjacks. To hard, never thought hip-hop would take it this far. So, that was from my man Scott right here, don't worry. It's my new partner. But it is an honor to be back here, hanging out with so many distinguished folk, Brother Mike Puma, Professor Jim Snow, Sister Erin, Reverend Scott Adams, and his lovely family, and his mother-in-law, and show love. And to all of the wonderful students and other faculty and wonderful folk who brought me here before and are here now still, what an honor it is to be back here at Loyola and to have this opportunity to chat a bit. I also know that you're splendid men's basketball coach, Coach Tavares Hardy, is here. Y'all show him love, show him love. One of the major benefactors of the school, the men's basketball team. Oh, right? I was telling Coach probably disagrees with everything. Don't hold this against him. This is me. But I'm at the NCAA tournament last night, right? At the Capital One Arena, the Wizards wish they could fill it up like that, right? All this gear, this horrible Duke apparel. But I was going for Duke, I'm ashamed to say. And the Michigan State stuff and all this stuff. These coaches making millions and these players ain't making a dime, right? On the backs of largely Black masculine performance in a culture where ostensibly they lack the credible intellectual certitude to justify and legitimate access to an institution because they ain't got $6.5 million to pay their work. I'm starting off wrong. Right?
Selah.
So, it will corrupt the process. Then don't pay the coaches. Sorry, Artie. We'll cap them at 100 grand. Right? If he ain't making that up him. Right? Is Mike Krzyzewski being turned out by Nike? But Zion Williamson busts through the shoe. Paul George, what's up with that? Right? I'm just saying, I'm just asking questions. That's what we do at schools, paid passes. To ask the question as to if it's going to be corrupting of an amateur sport, then why is it so much money is involved? And why is it that everybody's getting paid except the people who are doing the major work? I'm just saying, I don't know. What do I know?
Preach up in here.
Point guard. But I had a nice 3. I could shoot the J. What an honor it is to be here with Coach Hardy. You poached him from Georgetown. He's now here and doing an incredible job and a very dear friend, and you are fortunate to have a man of his stature in your midst, and some of his basketball players are here tonight. Now, tonight, what I want to do is to reflect on some themes that have been evoked in the historic work of the great James Baldwin. Your unified approach to study of that one book, the one book that was read, was The Fire Next Time by Mr. Baldwin.
Awesome book.
And so what I want to do is to pick up on some of those themes that I also elaborated in my latest book, What Truth Sounds Like, Robert F. Kennedy, James Baldwin, and our unfinished conversation on race. Now, many of my brothers and sisters from the right wing often talk about political correctness. Can't say certain things, you might offend people. What I've discovered most, however, that is most true is that people within the right wing are not used to hearing challenges to their uncontested belief system from highly articulate fellas or women on the other side who will challenge some of the unexamined assumptions that constitute what is political correctness, which is really repackaging bigotry to make it saleable and marketable to those who occupy positions of power. So I say that as fair warning that there will be a fair bit of that assailing here tonight. But it's going to be all on all sides, right? And initially, black people will support me, and then they will fall away. When I get into some other stuff, notice the amens that will echo and those that will decline. But when we think about a figure like James Baldwin, and if I were to give a title to this talk, and C. Van Woodward, the great historian, said that a title was a contract between an author and his or her audience, and now a speaker, and I'm cognizant that you have one of the most prolific and powerful public intellectuals in America here, Dr. K, Professor K. Whitehead, who is a wonderful, splendid example, Professor of Communications, African American Studies, directing a center, having written 4 books, one about her sons in a post-racial era, Race Brave, speaking about the letters of an earlier epic and century of black woman literary art, and I want to acknowledge her as well. I think she's here tonight, Professor K. I'm going to have her stand up. If she's not here, then, is she here? She was here. She stepped out. Got to get some water and medical marijuana. And it's tough teaching students. But does a tremendous job. But if I were to give a title to this talk, I would call it the United States of Amnesia.
Oh, that's good. Very good.
And that is not my title. It is pinched from the late, great Gore Vidal. And when I hear that term evoked, I think about Baldwin, because Baldwin was such a powerful challenge to a kind of amnesia that America was addicted to. An amnesia around issues of race and class and culture. When we think about the fact that we live in a society that is at one measure deeply attracted to the past. How many Confederacy reenactments of the Civil War have we witnessed? Particularly in the Soft South of Maryland and even further, right, from Virginia on. When we think about the regaling of contemporary citizens with the memory of the Civil War and what it meant to this fractured nation. Brother against brother, sister turned against sister, family against family, prosecuting a war that was deeply divisive and hostile to the ambitions of unification that were the ostensible purpose of the founding of the Republic to begin with. And so there is, on the one hand, an enormous machinery and marketing of memory. Not forgetting the Confederate flag, not forgetting the monuments that are the tokens of a fight, the most significant, or at least one of them in the history of the Western Hemisphere and certainly in this nation. And yet simultaneously there is a denial of the memory of others. If there is an evocation, for instance, of enslavement, or an argument about reparation to be paid for the vicious and invidious fashion in which bigotry prevailed, enough. Why can't you people get over that? History was a long time ago. So I'm confused. That same history at the same point that was being argued within the confines of a Confederate culture are the same historical landmarks that are being argued over within conversations of enslavement. So we have a bifurcated consciousness, a riven consciousness, a divorced consciousness. On the one hand, we have the unexcelled embrace of a Southern culture that was premised upon the notion of white supremacy. And white supremacy is the conscious or unconscious belief in the inherent superiority of one group over another. That was the basis of the distribution of resource, the assignment of privilege, the assignment of merit, the assignment of stigma, and the acknowledgement of humanity and intelligence. In Virginia, for instance, Thomas Jefferson wrote Notes on Virginia, a magisterial intellectual, a man of remarkable capacity, an architect of Monticello, the writer of the Declaration of Independence, Secretary of State, President of the United States of America, questioning the rational capacity of the Negro to engage in sustained critical analysis or even reasoned introspection, and yet at night, metaphorically, engaging in a relationship with a young black girl that the nation found itself incapable initially of acknowledging, as if that were a departure from the norm.
Right.
As if in American society, it was not the norm for men of power and standing who were white, who owned other human beings, who enslaved them, to have unlimited access to their sexual property. There was no Me Too movement to protect them.
There was no call upon Time's Up to suggest the end of the vagaries of colonialism. Yet right there was manifest in Mr. Jefferson, President Jefferson, a remarkable division of labor intellectually and spiritually and morally. On the one hand, acknowledging the rise of reason, the Enlightenment project, itself a product of extraordinary argument and debate about the degree to which a reasoned calculation of our relative space in American society would owe a debt to critical rationality and the office of enlightenment over against irrationality, over against superstition, and over against religion. And yet these same people committed to deep and profound reason gave way to uncritical forms of bigotry. And so white supremacy was the basis. And we've seen the revival of white supremacy in our own time, right up in Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. And I was speaking there the other night, and the bomb threat was called in. They were going to kill folk in the school. We know that not long ago, neo-Nazis walked on the streets of Charlottesville. A young white woman was killed as she protested the scourge of this anti-American ideology that is America at its best. And so, my brothers and sisters, when I speak of amnesia, I'm speaking about the degree to which America is addicted to a selective memory of who we are as a nation. And yet, on the other hand, when the prospect of grappling with its past through the office of race presents itself, or the actions of people of color, especially African Americans, there is a denial. This is why James Baldwin is so critical. Baldwin is critical because in The Fire Next Time, he takes hold of the religious rhetoric that has infused and informed American society and tests the durability and limit the finite capacity of reason to adjudicate competing claims. The ability of whiteness itself to exhaust a meaning of America. Mm-hmm. That what is whiteness is what is American. Mm-hmm. And if it challenges whiteness, it seems to challenge Americanness because the two have been collapsed. Mm-hmm. Right. The great philosopher Beyonce knows. Upon giving out an award to Colin Kaepernick, said that it has been said that racism is so American that when we challenge racism, it looks as if we're challenging America.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And so, my brothers and sisters, James Baldwin is critical because he provides a vocabulary of interrogation and introspection. He wants to challenge what it means to be an American. He wants to challenge what it means to be black. He wants to challenge what it means to be white. In that book, he talks about race, blackness, and whiteness as a political fiction. Nobody's born and in their genes have written upon them what it means to be white or black. This is stuff we make up. There's no genetic encoding.
Exactly.
Right? People coming here from Italy, Lithuania, Poland, Ireland, folk who are Jews or another part of the Eastern European panoply of ethnicity, with their individual respective cultures, come here, but in the crucible of race, those ethnic identities are pulverized and recreated as whiteness. Mm-hmm. Blackness, too, is a political fiction. Mm-hmm. The notion of black unity, as if that has some transracial significance, some trans-ethnic significance. When enslaved people were brought here, they were not slaves, they were enslaved.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Coming extricated from their resting soil in Africa, that continent that ain't no country. Different countries, different languages, brought here, not speaking the same language. That was deliberate. Let's put them together so there would be no hooking up of conspiracy.
Wow.
fomenting revolution and rebellion against the hegemony, the dominance of the American ideal as it punished people in the Northern Hemisphere. And so Baldwin said, that's all a political fiction. There's no heretical characteristics that define race. Race is a social construct. Now, all of y'all are smart college students. This is passé to you. Of course. Race is a social construct. When the cab driver passes you up, tell him, sir, there's a figment of your imagination. I am not what I seem to be. I am a projection of your collective unconsciousness and the reification of différance. And the cab driver just passed your ass upstairs. And so Baldwin said, no, it's a political fiction. It's what we make of it. America grasps hold of whiteness and blackness and makes things out of them, creates them whole cloth, out of the social and moral and political and philosophical and religious material of the culture. That's why all of those regions become adjuncts to white supremacy. That's why religion reinforces it. That's why you expect them to go to church and hear an evangelical piety that will be on display, that will be prophetic, that will challenge white supremacy, but it often ends up reinforcing it. Why, when the man who occupied 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue before the one that's there now, the white evangelical contingency was on his behind. And then they got a guy up in there for real, don't know much about Jesus. Don't go to church, don't be checking it out. And they love him to death, as if he's the second coming of the Lord.
Go
Like the rapture is appearing. Isn't that interesting? Because the real religion is not Christianity, it's whiteness in America.
Free, sir.
And so this concentrated effect of unconsciously paying homage to a kind of racialized understanding of the world.
Saying coming to Kenny
that
Loggins.
religion is subordinate to whiteness, that politics is subordinate to whiteness. The whole point of politics in American society for so long was to find ways to make democracy amenable to a dominant white culture. That's why the justification for it was, if you are intelligent and a property-owning white man, you could be counted as a citizen. Women were excluded, people of color were excluded. Because whiteness was the dominant identity to which people were to pay obeisance. So Baldwin comes along in 1863 and the fire next time. It's only 100 years after emancipation. And I know y'all think 100 years is a long time, and it is. But the reality is, in the history of the nation, it ain't that long. So in 1963, when he pens this book, right, first serialized in the New Yorker, letter to my nephew, my dungeon shook just when I thought all was lost. My dungeon shook and my chains fell off. Writing an open letter to his nephew, and then a longer piece, and that appeared in another magazine, maybe the Progressive, but the piece in the New Yorker was the main body of The Fire Next Time, where Baldwin goes in, looking at the Nation of Islam, looking at black religious sentiment, often without celebration, often without uncritical valorization. He was critical. He saw the good and the bad. He saw the beauty, the power, the allure of what an urban religious black deity could offer to people who were being demonized in the dominant worldview of white America. But he didn't just celebrate it. He didn't just uncritically embrace it. He examined it. And he used that to look at America, the judgment of the Nation of Islam upon America, the judgment of black urban citizens upon America. And so Baldwin, with his eloquence and his power, challenged America to rethink its destiny. And he said the few good people who were willing to do so could save America. How we need to hear that again today. 1963 was a fertile fecund year. Fired next time. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech in August 28th, 1963, where he stood on a sunlit summit of expectation and announced to the nation his dream. Most Americans get caught up in that dream as if King only had one speech. It's like saying Frank Sinatra only had one song.
Come on, oh man.
Show
Yes.
respect to the chairman up here tonight. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Right? He sang more than that. I did it my way. Right? Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. Right? I left my heart. Okay, that's Tony Bennett. He had more than one song. Luther Vandross had one or more songs. Y'all don't even know who Luther is. Shameful. Stuck on Jackheads as the greatest R&B singer of his generation. Stop! That's for young people. Don't worry about it. Luther Vandross. Y'all remember him? Y'all don't remember Luther.
Yeah, we do.
I was stuck on R. Kelly.
Nah.
Hard out here for a brother right now. Michael Jackson, hard for a brother right now. Right? So Luther Vandross had more than one song, but I rule. It's not a house, and a
House is not a home.
The two of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're back around now, David. Show them love. Right? Don't you remember? I told you I loved you, baby. Y'all don't know nothing about that.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, me and young Scott were talking about Biggie versus Tupac. Y'all don't even remember Biggie versus Tupac. Y'all listen to Little Yachty, Little Woody, Little. And the thing is, I love hip hop, but god darn, what you saying now? I don't know. This mumble rap, what the? Know what I'm saying? No, actually,
Don't know. None of us know.
Come on,
This
Tom.
ain't nothing extra. I'm saying this is just the extra stuff. This ain't my main point, but let me go. Like what in the hell are y'all talking about right now? See, I heard the music standing by the speaker. Suddenly I had a fever. Was it me or either Summer Madness? That's Rakim. So I just can't stand around. So I get closer and the closer I get, the better it sounds. My mind starts to activate. Rhymes collaborate. Because when I heard the beat, I just had to make something from the top of my head. So I fell into the groove of the wax and I said, how can I move the crowd? First of all, ain't no mistakes. I mean, you know. Now, I don't know.
What?
Only part I know, walk it like you talk. That part I know.
Oh,
What does it mean? Walk it like you talk.
That's it.
So King had more than one speech.
Teach today.
1963, he articulated his vision for America. Even that speech was far more complicated, far more revolutionary than people gave him credit for. He starts off 1963, like Baldwin, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. 50 years ago, great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today. Well, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. In the shadow of Lincoln, King articulates his vision. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
Wow.
That's 100 years after that bloody war, after that remission of sins, after the nation found its soul. And Mr. Lincoln attempted to save it, and I know others argue, well, he didn't have pure motives. he said, if I could have found a way to keep the nation intact and not get rid of slavery, I would have done it. Sorry. I don't care why he did it. He still set Negroes free. Right? It ain't what his reason was. We can argue about complicated rationality, and it does make a difference politically, but I'm just saying at the end of the day, he still signed the damn document. The Negroes eventually found out they were free.
Eventually.
And so Martin Luther King Jr., standing there, said, 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro finds himself and herself marooned, he says, his exact words, on a tiny island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, he said the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of this nation until the Negro is granted his or her citizenship rights. And then he said, we have come to the nation's capital to cash a check. I know many of you don't know how to write checks. You're into this postmodern banking. You just deal with it online.
Direct
switch
deposit.
money from one account to the other. But those of us who are older used to write checks. Some of them worked. And when they didn't, they called it a bounce check. Basketball, bounce check. And so King said, but we refuse to believe that the great vaults of democracy are empty. In other words, he had a Rihanna moment. Nation better have my money. Then he went on to say that the Negroes in the South can't vote. And the Negroes in the North believe they have nothing for which to vote.
Wow.
And even today, when we see the machinations of an immoral legal infrastructure that legislatively attempts to redraw lines, or gerrymander, or deny people access to votes, come up with ID laws that are quite ridiculous. Reflecting poll taxes that used to be put forward, or literacy tests that black people had to pass in order to vote. Now, the irony is the white folk administering the test couldn't pass them either. How many jelly beans? You don't know. You just making that shit up anyway. Right? Recite the first lines of, you don't know them, as if you were born here with a sense of Tennyson, though much is taken much abides. Though we are not now that strength, which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. You ain't literate like that. Thank you. Praise elegy in a courtyard, full many a gem of purest race serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bare, full many flowers born to blush unseen and wasted sweetness on the desert air. You don't have that inherent sense of poetic meter and convention. You just made it up to try to justify and legitimate your superiority when it's manifest that you ain't superior. And so Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to that. He talked about police brutality. It was real in '63. It's real in 2019.
Yep.
A couple days ago, I was in Northern California, Willie McCoy, asleep in his car in Vallejo, and the police killed him. And many white brothers and sisters in particular used to ask black people, man, you must have done something, Mike. Right? The police ain't just gonna shoot you for no reason. Welcome to the cell phone. Welcome to the smartphone. Welcome to the fact that I'm telling you I can't breathe, but you still kill me, Eric Garner. Or Mr. Reed, down in Sterling, down in
Louisiana.
Selling CDs. 2 policemen take him down and without provocation, shoot him in cold blood. Mr. Philando Castile in Minnesota announces, I have a legally registered gun. And 7 seconds later, he is dead. Or the microabrasions, the micro-infections, the microaggressions. Sounds sweeter than it really is. Little paper cuts against the psyche of people where you question, did you really write that paper? Do you really belong at Yale? Why are you asleep here? What? Is your body really acceptable at Starbucks? If, unlike Zion Williamson, you're not a Starbuck?
Oh, God.
Why are you here? It's all right for you to perform on stage, on court, 6'7", 6'8", 280 pounds. Got a sweet jump shot, know what a pinch post is, know how to deal with a moving screen, know how to block out, know how to stand up, share the ball, on the gridiron, know how to deal with a zone defense. But when you zone in outside of the gridiron and the court on the forces that reduce your people to nothingness, you are seen as a son of a bitch, according to the president. If you dare use your authority and cultural power to stand up for your people and say, I will take a knee, not disrespectful to anybody, and you get more resistance than folk who are standing up to support a Confederate flag, or those who hate gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual people. We are living in terror. And so Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against that. And that day, on the side of the podium was a black woman, because women weren't allowed on stage. Even when you're fighting one form of oppression, you can reproduce another. So his good friend Mahalia Jackson, who had been on stage to sing but had to leave, saw that King was reading a speech, and usually King didn't read speeches. He was best extemporaneously. It doesn't mean he wasn't prepared. It meant that he allowed the words to flow from the rhythm and cadence of his own heart, that his oratorical majesty allowed him to use that golden throat with that silver tongue to articulate powerful ideas. And so she said, tell him about the dream, Martin. And he put that manuscript down and he started freestyling and flowing. Because even when black women ain't on program, they still in control. That's another lecture. So in that year, 1963, the speech of King, unless you believe that the king we have now is the king we had then, it's not true. The FBI said he was the most dangerous Negro leader in America, the second in command. See, Trump is right about the FBI, but like 50 years ago. Right? COINTELPRO, they're looking at Einstein and Paul Robeson, Mrs. King, Coretta's King, Martin Luther King Jr. What you, they ain't doing nothing. The FBI was so riled up that instead of white supremacists, some of whom were aided and abetted by its own agents, instead of looking at them, they were looking at black people who were communists. Now the FBI going to open an investigation on Jussie Smollett. Negro was tripping. If it's true, I don't know. And he's a friend of mine. I love him, but he could be wrong. And if he did that wrong, that was crazy. That was cray-cray. Right? But there must be something going on. So let's examine that. Writing letters and doing, if you did it, that's wrong. Chris Rock said it's a waste of light skin. Turn to your white neighbor and explain that later. My God, it takes too long. He said, if I had that curly hair, that light skin, I could run out of here. If he did it. But if you're white, why are you mad at Jussie Smollett when the FBI won't open an investigation into police people who continue with little moral introspection to murder people of color? So is this a use of national resources to look at Jussie Smollett and not people who with a badge and a gun intimidate people of color. And I know many people go, wait a minute now. What about the black people who kill black people? True enough.
Right.
93% of black people who are murdered by black people. 84% of white people who are murdered by white people. I don't hear an outcry, oh my God, Jiminy Cricket, what's going on with the white family? It's going to hell in the handbasket, and it's ridiculous.
Preach up in here.
Mr. Trump is also right about the media. 50 years ago. If it bleeds, it leads in Philadelphia is what they said, which meant that you were going to highlight and underscore black pathology, black crime. So a black woman who lied about her zip code to get her child into a school is in jail. And now we discover many white parents with means got to hook up. Not my man. But I saw some of the stuff there. I was like, I could have gave you half off. I'll let you, boy. I mean, I wasn't going to charge you them rates. I mean, $6.5 million? Can you imagine if you're the parent that spent $6 million and you discover the actress got her kid in for $15,000? I want my money back. I teach at the well-known African-American school, Georgetown. And while there, many students have to deal with the presupposition of some of their elite white classmates. Did you get in because of affirmative action? Now, first of all, affirmative action don't even mean what you think it means. It means that in the competition over scarce resources, two equally qualified candidates come head to head, and the nod is given to the historically underrepresented minority. Now, think about it. Does every smart person in America go to Harvard? With perfect scores? There's always been a way in which you go, oh, wait a minute. They're both equally smart, but that person knows country music and they live in Missouri. And most people we've admitted have been coming from Michigan. Let's get a nod to the Missouri person. Right? Let's get a nod to the person whose daddy gave $7.5 million.
Well,
I ain't mad at you, player. Right? Let's give the nod to a person whose son and grandson, great-grandson are going to go here because their great-great-granddaddy went here.
That's legacy.
So there are always contingent modifications to a notion of objective merit. Right? And so, my brothers and sisters, do we now look at white kids and go, did your mama pay your way up? How would white brothers and sisters feel like every year when school started? What your name is? Who you be with? What your zip code is? What your mama do? Did she buy your way up in here? The burden would be unbearable. First humorous, but then not. How dare you, with unabashed temerity, to suggest that I did not, because of my skill, get in. And so, my friends, we live in a culture where race, as Mr. Baldwin saw it, operates in such predictable fashion, and yet is a socially constructed reality that we have to contend with. So in that year, Baldwin's book, King's Speech, and a great meeting between Baldwin and R.F. Kennedy and some of his friends. Baldwin had met Robert Kennedy at one of the White House events for Nobel Prize winners. It might have been that gathering where John Kennedy said, there haven't been this many geniuses in the White House since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. And so they met, they dug each other, young. Robert Kennedy didn't want the vision of the official leadership, not Martin Luther King Jr., not Whitney Young. Martin Luther King Jr., head of SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Whitney Young, head of the Urban League, National Urban League. Mr. Roy Wilkins, head of the NAACP. He said, I want some people who are like with their ears to the street. Let me get James Baldwin, a writer, a thinker, who doesn't have to be politically correct. He can tell the truth about race. So they met, but Baldwin's plane was late, they didn't have it half an hour. He said, look, tomorrow, because they were out in Virginia, in the suburbs. He said, tomorrow, I'm going to be in New York. Why don't you invite some of your friends to come through the crib? Excuse me, my domicile, to on Central Park West. Or is it Central? In Central Park, the family compound, and let's have a meeting. When you're James Baldwin, your friends are Harry Belafonte,
Right.
Lena Horne, and Lorraine Hansberry. Like Jay-Z, Beyonce, right? And maybe Drake. That's some international flavor. Afro-Canadian. Kiki, do you love me? So they got together. Robert Kennedy was going to give the report. He was going to receive all the plaudits. Yes, Negroes, celebrate me because me and my brother have done white liberal stuff. We have done great stuff to help you out. Not so fast. They were grateful for John Kennedy, but John Kennedy was playing both ends against the men. On the one hand, he was telling black people he was going to support them. Remember, he placed a well-timed call to the governor of Georgia when King was in jail in 1960, when he was running for president against Richard Nixon. Black people heard about it because of King's father, who broadcast it, one of the few black people who could vote. And those black people who could vote voted for John Kennedy, and it swung the election. But Kennedy, on that same call that he got King out of jail, promised the governor, was it Vandiver of Georgia, I will not use federal authority to impose myself on your state's rights to discriminate against Negroes. He also appointed racist judges who called black people nigger from the bench. So he was speaking with a divided mouth. And Robert Kennedy was a bit better, but the Negroes there gathered knew what the deal was. So when they got together, they also included a Black Lives Matter member of his day, Mr. Jerome Smith from CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. And so they were having a nice little meeting and little hors d'oeuvres, and Kennedy was telling them, we have to make sure we vote for the right person because there's an election coming up, sound familiar? So we have to be unified at the expense of black electoral possibility. That young man said, I'm tired of this pity patter. And he went in on Robert Kennedy. And Kennedy was astonished. How dare you talk to a man in my position like this, right? And he said, I'm tired of this. We're out on the streets getting beat to death, and nobody is helping us. And Kennedy tried to turn to the reasonable Negroes. And Lorraine Hansberry said, there are a lot of reasonable Negroes up in here, but the only person you should be listening to is that young man right there. Because he in the streets, he know what it is. I know it's he knows what it is. Excuse me, as I abonicize my articulation. He know what it is. He's on the front lines. And so for 3 hours, they pummeled Kennedy. Got knee deep in his imagination. And after that speech, Kennedy did what any good white liberal would do. He sicked the FBI. White Northern Seaboard liberal sicked the FBI on the people gathered there because he was outraged that they would dare speak the truth to him, because many white people don't really want to hear the truth about race and can't really afford to because it offends sensibilities. And most black people are so nice, they never do tell the truth. They just be lying. Wow. Then they hire a Negro like me to come along.
Thank you.
That sounds so crazy. Because I don't know how to varnish it that much. And I figure you don't want to waste your time or money.
Right.
So we got to tell the truth. It doesn't mean it's the only truth. It doesn't mean I'm right. It means that I represent a particular perspective that is not often taken as normative because the dominant white eardrum can't hear it. I would be Watts music, Stax music, not Motown. Motown was geared toward the white ear. That's why the music still reigns. That was the genius of Berry Gordy. The way you do the things you do. So he cut out the heavy bass. He made it melodic. Each day through my window, I watch her. Right? But Stax was coming in with the Negro horns. Da 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 da. And so And so that truth, that unvarnished truth that Robert Kennedy was not used to hearing, came out that day. And in that conversation, Kennedy, after Baldwin asked the young black activist, would you go to war to fight? He said, hell no. Kennedy was insulted. How dare you? His brother, remember, was a war hero. Joseph died in the war. John Kennedy on a PT boat, remember? So his family was valiant, valorous, courageous. But this young man's point was, why am I going to fight in a war when I get back home? You refuse to acknowledge my humanity.
All right.
Mr. Kennedy went on to say, I know what it means to be black to a degree because I'm Irish. Right? Because Irish wasn't just regular white. Right? That's why they call it the paddy wagon. The paddy wagon meant paddy, oh paddy, a demonized articulation, anglicized, of Irish identity because they got drunk on the weekend. So Mr. Paddy was in the, it's like calling it the Shaquille wagon. So the paddy wagon was an ethnic negative that was imposed on Irish identity. So yeah, there was some real Irish hostility in this country. But then Baldwin said, but see, that's the problem. Kennedy, you are second generation. You already got a president. We've been here for 5 and 6 and 7 generations. Can't even get elected to nothing.
All right.
And so Kennedy was irate and mad. How dare they be ungrateful? That's the charge against black people. You ungrateful for what I've done to help you Negroes out. And then he calmed down. And he wrote a note to his aide. He said, you know, if I were born black in this country, I might be angry too. This is where amnesia meets memory and is crushed in the exchange, and the advantage is given to those who understand the deep undercurrents of history in this country. And so, my brothers and sisters, James Baldwin was so important. And he continues to be important because he appeals to a newer generation of Black Lives Matter activists who understand that identity is critical. You see, the March on Washington was architected by a black gay man. James Baldwin was a black gay man. He understood his blackness, but he understood his own sexual orientation too. So did Bayard Rustin, who was the architect of that movement. A lot of homophobia in black culture, like there is in American culture. Even today, we see powerful undercurrents of homophobia blocking our appreciation for the genius of some of our gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual black brothers and sisters. People say, why that movement got to be full of gay people? Like they ain't you. Like white supremacists making sure, wait a minute now, are they gay?
Right.
Because if they're gay, we'll exempt them from the most serious horror. That ain't how they do it. If you black, you black. Whether you swing in one way or another. Right, and black people go to church to try to get justification from God. Let me check in with headquarters. And then black people start doing the same thing white folk did. Well, the word says, that's what white folk did to you.
Yeah.
They tried to use the word to justify you being a slave, obey your master. Ham, right, was cursed. Son of Noah, and then turned dark and black. I used to be in my house when some of the alternative religious groups would come to my door. If you know Ham is cursed, I say, hey, I don't eat pork. So black people, I was in Cleveland the other day preaching. Black woman came up to me and she said, you know you're going to hell. I said, did Jesus tell you this already? I don't know. She said, you know why I'm saying that? I said, no, why? She said, because you had the gall to say God created gay people. I said, you think I'm going to hell? You believe in more than one God? Like there's one God that creates gay people, another creates straight people? How'd that work? She said, you know what I mean. They chose to be gay. I didn't choose to be black. I said, I got news for you. Some people have opted out of the plan of blackness. They are no longer covered full coverage. They don't want to participate. I ain't gonna name no names. You know who they are. Clarence. But what I'm saying. What are people talking about? Clarence Carter is one of my favorite singers. Ben. What? Been there, done that. I'm not talking about Ben Carson from Baltimore, Johns Hopkins, who separated twins, but can't separate himself from that bullshit and that administration going on right now. Excuse me, Scott, don't listen to those words. She said, you're going to hell because you're trying to make God support gay people. I said, ma'am, let me tell you something. I said, it's not a choice. Let me tell you how it's not a choice. You can be a white senator from Iowa, and you can support straight marriage, nuclear families, traditional marriage. You stand against gay marriage, but you go into the bathroom in a public stall. You sit down and kick the toe of the neighbor in the next stall to indicate that you are available for gay eroticism. Now, I've done the same thing, but I was asking for some toilet paper. I did not know. That was the son. Forgive me. Who would choose not to be gay more than that guy? Who would not be gay if they could help it, if not him? Gay people can no more get up and be straight tomorrow than you can get up and be gay. And if you can, I've helped you out today. I don't reduce gay sexuality to the performance, because there are some people who are straight who are celibate. Gay as well, lesbian as well, transgendered as well, bisexual as well. It's not about a function, it's about an utility of sexuality. It's about an identity. And it amazes me when people argue against identity. Politics have ruined America. Every identity in America is at stake. Whiteness has been rendered universal, therefore it's not seen as an identity when it is omnicompetent. Whiteness has been rendered invisible and therefore universal and therefore unchallengeable and doesn't get outed as a particular identity. And so for black folk who want to turn around and make God co-sign our bigotry against gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual people, we are undercutting the moral trajectory of a James Baldwin. And whether it's sexual orientation or whether it's class, the way one comedian went around the country about 10 years ago beating up on young black people and the people with the jello and the pudding pop. He said, you name your kids Shaliqua, Taliqua, Muhammad, and all that crap, and they're all in jail. Guess he figured they needed company. This is not to damn him, but we drank the Mickey. He drugged us as a community long before he was accused of drugging women. With politics of respectability, with the very notion we would demonize young black people, that they had to live a different life, that women were, he argued, more promiscuous. He says, this is what Cosby literally said. I know you didn't listen to it, it's my job to do so. He said, pretty soon you're going to have a DNA card in the ghetto to determine if you're making love to your grandma. He said, she's 13 and has a baby, then that baby turns 13 and has a baby. He says, you do the math. The grandma's 26. I'm trying to keep you from having sex with your grandma. If a white man had said that, we would have run him out of town. And so, when it comes to class, generation, that's why I listen to this hip-hop music, when I can understand it. I go to Genius to look at the lyrics, to translate for me. These is bloody shoes. When I see you, I don't talk to you. That means I don't with you. I like it like that. So, when we begin to hear the agony, the trauma, the intergenerational trauma being transmitted, the power of the words to intervene. Back in the days, our parents used to take care of us, Biggie said. Look at them now, they're even scared of us. Calling the state for help, city for help because they can't maintain damn things unchanged. If I wasn't in the rap game, I'd probably have a key knee deep in the crack game because the streets is a short stop. Either you're slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. Damn, it's hard being young from the slums, eating 5-cent gums, not knowing where your meal's coming from. What happened to the summertime cookout every time I turned around our brothers being took out? He said that along with, I used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat. Wondered why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we're thirsty. Damn right I like the life I live because I went from negative to positive and it's all good. And if you don't know, now you know. Jay-Z said, now all my teachers couldn't reach me and my mama couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pop not seeing me. So with that disdain in my membrane, get on my pimp game, blank the world, my defense came. Now I said it's only right that I was born to use mics and the stuff that I write is even tougher than Dyson, taking rap into a new plateau through rap slow. My rhyming is a vitamin hell without a capsule. A smooth criminal on beat breaks. Never put me in your box if your issues takes. And our beloved brother Nipsey Hussle, who got murdered yesterday. Jesus. I'm prolific, so gifted, he said. I spent a day with him on an airplane going from Los Angeles to New York. He talked about it on the E-Bro show, they posted it today. He said, I'm on a plane with Michael Eric Dyson. Somebody said, good luck with trying to get some sleep on that trip. He said, no, I was asking him questions. Right. I was trying to dig into his mind. Damn right, I'm an OG. We need more of that. We need more interactions between rhetorically sophisticated hip-hop artists and some OG intellectuals who spit too. I've been spitting long before hip-hop found its métier. I pimp pages, turn metaphors to better horse to serve sages like Socrates and Plato. You think I'm dealing with Plato? I write books like niggas write hooks. Back to the program at hand. That's nigga, not nigger. Get it right. Many white people who are gathered here know you cannot use either. Either. Just save me some time. Can I use the... Don't do it. No!
Don't do it.
That's all for us.
Don't do it.
And part of the restoration of black privilege is to take it from dominant white culture that invented the term, but we hijacked it, now you can't use it. Right. Now I'll tell you what, this is how you can use it. Only for one day for 24 hours. If all wealth is turned over to black people, I'm offering a special fire sale. You can say nigga for 24 hours.
Oh, Lord.
And so, whether it's sexual orientation, or whether it's generation, or whether it's class, or whether it's gender, James Baldwin gave us an intersectional sense of blackness that was deep and profound. Intersectional, so many things operating at the same time. So as I take my seat, as I end today, the amnesia that must be fought is the belief that America is one thing only. Yes, e pluribus unum, out of many one, but the many has to be calculated, has to be acknowledged. The many have to be opened up to, must be seen as a vital part of the American drama, the pageantry of American identity. And so for me, at the end of the day, what Baldwin did is so important. To challenge the amnesia of this country so that America won't think it always did the right thing. Now you can't find a black person who didn't march with Dr. King or a white one who didn't love him. Many black people didn't march with King. They were scared. They didn't want to get involved. Many white people called him Martin Luther King, not just two people on air recently. They saw him as a threat. James Baldwin was seen as a fractious gay man who was out of style for so many years. Just recently has his reputation been revived. And so for you, my brothers and sisters, what we must do is to expose all of our bigotry. Black or white or red or yellow or brown, rich or poor, left or right, whatever religion we produce, the greatest terror in America has not come from Islam, it has come from Christianity. They didn't burn crescents and stars on lawns, they burned crosses. That is American terror writ large against the canopy of human history, the genocidal impulse of a racist edict of an American government that sanctified and legitimated the hatred of humans as the basis of its identity. That's why Baldwin is great. An American prophet to remind us that we must claim our citizenship in the kingdom of memory. Baldwin said, I love America above any other nation, therefore I reserve the right to criticize her perpetually. We have a president, God bless him, who believes that if you criticize America, that you are un-American. He also said, if you can't speak English, leave. There's hope that he will get exported. This man who stands up every morning to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he has turned into his psychic commode.
That's good.
This man who refuses to acknowledge that Mexicans are human beings, that immigration is not a bully pulpit to stand on, to demonize the other, that xenophobia, the hatred of others who come to this nation would be nothing without immigration. From all places and spaces. And now we have the specter of white supremacy joined and tethered to this man in the White House. We know he's in part got swag envy against the guy who had the job before he did. He just mad because he ain't got Obama's style. And Obama wasn't a perfect president, to be sure. He could have done a lot more. One thing Trump has shown, there's a lot of stuff you can do as president. It's just a lot of stuff. You could be signing stuff and putting out orders, and you could be hooking stuff up, right? Mad or not, you can see he's very active. The guy who had the job before was timid about it. You're the president. What you mad at, son? What you scared of? He lectured black people, condescendingly looked down his nose at many of us, and many of us were as blind to Obama's faults as many white folk are to Trump's.
Preach.
Now you're talking.
Now, one president was better. By far.
By far.
No matter what I critique, I would rather have him back for a third term. Right? I mean, let's be real. He spoke intelligently, complete sentences, with gerunds and participles in place, with verbs and nouns that agreed, and he knew how to spell hamburger.
Oh, God.
Here's a man there now who is proud to be unmolested by enlightenment. So we must stand against forces of destruction no matter where they are. Baldwin reminds us that the beauty of poetry and prophecy is to make America great for the first time. Thank you.